or that view was last seen by a human being in 1972. It was a long time ago. Yeah, that's the last time anyone ever went to the moon. That was so long, and so since then, a lot has happened, though, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. So this was the very first American astronaut, and he flew in space for the very first time in May of 1961. So a long time ago. But I was sitting on the floor watching a television in my home when he went, and I thought to myself, he went up and he got on top of this rocket in a little bitty capsule up there. You see the black piece on the top? Yeah, that piece right there. That's big enough. That's big enough for just one person to fit in it. And so he flew on that rocket right there, and he actually left the atmosphere, flew in space for only about 15 minutes, and then landed back in the Atlantic Ocean. But that was our very first space flight. But it got us started, and this was me at the age when I was watching that. So I didn't know I was ever going to become an astronaut. So for some of you that are here that think you might want to be an astronaut, you can do it, because that was me. I wasn't born as an astronaut. It just kind of happened. But along the way, while I was in school, watching us as we were getting closer and closer to the moon, eventually in Christmas time of 1968, the first human beings to ever leave the Earth left the Earth's environment and went to the moon, and they were able to see that view right there. Can you see the Earth in the background? Yeah. And that's the moon right there, and very, very close. And then that eventually led to the next year when the very first people set foot on the moon. Does anyone know who the first man on the moon was? Neil Armstrong, yeah. Very, very good. You've been doing your homework. And so Neil stepped down on the moon. And we had a number of other missions. There were a total of 6 missions that landed on the surface of the moon. But after that, the United States decided we don't want to use a capsule just one time. We want to build a reusable vehicle, something that we can use over and over and over. And that's where the space shuttle program came in. So here, as we look at this picture, you can see the space shuttle in the background. That's the space shuttle Atlantis. And this picture was taken in 1992. And in 1992, the United States was celebrating the 500th anniversary of Columbus having discovered the New World. So on the day before I was launching on my first mission, 3 replica ships from Christopher Columbus's fleet went sailing past the launch pad there. So when I look at that picture, what I see is 500 years of transportation technology development. Because if you were going to cross the Atlantic Ocean 500 years before, you would have gotten in one of these really modern ships, because that was the best they had of the day. And it would take you 2 months to cross the Atlantic Ocean going from the east to the west. Now, if we fast forward 500 years, I got in a different kind of a ship, a spaceship, which is on the launch pad there. And the day after this picture was taken, I crossed the Atlantic Ocean going in the opposite direction in under 10 minutes. So 2 months and then 10 minutes. So how do you think we'll be traveling 500 years from now? I don't think we know the answer to that. I know I don't know the answer to that. But I do think that it's not going to be the way we're doing it today. So somebody will invent something, or somebody will develop a new technology, and people will be traveling in a more efficient and maybe even a safer manner in the future. So, yeah, so there's the space shuttle in action right here. So the challenge that we have to get something from off the surface of the Earth and get it into space is we have to make it go really fast. In fact, it has to go 17,500 miles an hour to stay in space. Yeah, you know what that means? 17,500 miles an hour is faster than 5 miles every second. Imagine how fast that is. Yeah, so to do that, it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of power. And so we get the majority of the power early on in the first 2 minutes of the launch from those big white rockets that are on the side there. They have enough fuel in them to burn for 2 minutes. Yeah, but only 2 minutes, and that only gets us going about 1/5 or 1/6 as fast as we need to go. Now the 3 engines that are on the back there that you can see burning, they're being fed liquid oxygen out of this brown tank and liquid hydrogen out of that brown tank. And they start about 7 seconds before launch, and they'll burn the entire time to get us into space. So they'll burn for 8.5 minutes that it takes us to get into space. So what is it we do when we're in space? Well, my first mission was a science mission, and we studied the sun, and we studied the Earth's atmosphere and the relationship between the two, how the sun affects the Earth's atmosphere. My second and my third missions were to go capture satellites that were meant to become home, and we brought them home. And then my fourth mission, the one we're going to see the video of here, was to help build the International Space Station. Have you heard of the International Space Station before? Yeah, it's really a neat place. It's very big. It's bigger than a football field. And yeah, and as you can see it here. And this is what it looked like when it's finished. Well, on my mission, I carried up 2 pieces of the space station. So we rendezvoused and we docked with the space station, and then we used the robotic arm on the space shuttle, and we put the pieces in place. And then we did spacewalks to hook everything up so that it would work. So we can see a lot of things while we're up there, though. You're in this picture, believe it or not. This is what Oklahoma City looks like from space. Here you can see the river coming down through the city. That's right here, and you can see the runways out at the airport out there. So there are a lot of things that you can see from space. Yeah, if you're lucky, you might get to see a volcano erupt. This volcano was over in Russia, over there, but it was pretty easy to tell which direction the wind was blowing. Yeah, the sights from the atmosphere are really pretty, and we get to see them a lot because when we're going 17,500 miles an hour around the world, the sun comes up or the sun goes down every 45 minutes. So every day we see 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets up there, and the scenery is just spectacular. It's beautiful. And on the night side, on the night side, you actually can see things that look like they're unreal. And this is the aurora. It's way up by the North Pole. And there's another one that's way down by the South Pole. And it's caused by the interaction of the sun with the Earth's magnetic field. So the space shuttle missions were typically about 2 weeks or less, because that's all of the supplies that we could carry with us to go up there. So at the end of the 2 weeks, when it was time to come home, we would turn around and we would slow down just a little bit, and that would be enough to have us start falling from the orbit that we were in. It would have us start falling towards the top of the atmosphere. And then once we started hitting air in the atmosphere, the air would slow us down. But we were going so fast still that there was a lot of friction, so it got really hot outside. So this picture here shows you what it looks like, the trail that the space shuttle was making as it was coming back and re-entering the atmosphere. So you can see the surface of the Earth is there, and the top of the atmosphere is just right there. So the atmosphere is very, very thin. It's not very, very thick at all. And outside, when it gets really hot outside, it gets as hot as 3,000 degrees. In fact, I looked at it, and I go, the scientists say that this material outside the window is called plasma. But when I looked at it, I said, I think I know what that is. That's fire. We're surrounded by fire coming in. So that's what it looks like looking out the window there. So it's 3,000 degrees. And in our case, on this mission, we got 2 extra days in space because the weather in Florida wasn't good enough for us to come back and land. It was kind of like outside today in Florida. And so we got to stay in space 2 extra days, but then when we had to come home, because we were running out of supplies, they had us land in California. Here, so we've got the short video here. Let's see if it starts for me. We'll try it again here. Here it just started. It's got about a 7-second video. So this is a short video of that last mission where we went to the space station and we carried up 2 pieces. Our launch was actually about 45 minutes after sunset. So here we are walking out. My pilot on the mission was Colonel Pam Melroy that you saw next to me there. And Pam was the only first-time flyer on the crew. She was the only rookie. The rest of us had flown multiple times before. But here's what it's like climbing into my seat, because when the space shuttle was on the launch pad, my seat was way up there. I had to climb up to get in it. Here's Pam getting in next to me. 4 of us were upstairs on the flight deck. The other 3 folks were downstairs. We were a 7-person crew. And the downstairs folks don't have a window or a display, so they're just along for the ride. Here's those main engines starting before liftoff, and then the space shuttle actually used to launch itself. The onboard computers would send the commands to light the boosters. Here's what it looks like as the engines start, and then the boosters ignite there. You can see the vibration. Of course, the noise level gets pretty loud. So we would climb just straight up for about 8 seconds, and then the computers would command the vehicle to roll to get into the proper orbit so that we could rendezvous with the space station. After 2 minutes, the fuel in those booster rockets was used up, so we jettisoned those, and they fell back into the ocean, and we would reuse them. That flash is what it looks like from inside when the motors are being jettisoned from us. Now right here, I reached over and congratulated Pam. I shook her hand, and that's because we were just crossing 50 miles of altitude, and she became the planet's newest astronaut there, so because she was doing it for the first time. So here we are, up in orbit. My docking system is right here, right behind my window. And you can think of the docking as I have half of it on my side and half of it's on the space station side, and my job is to bring the 2 halves together to make them work. So this is a view of a camera looking out through my docking system. And this is what the space station looked like. And I flew around to a point above it and came down and I docked with that port right there. So here it is here, we're above it now. There's a target in the middle there that we'll see in a minute that I rely on. There's a target right there. It's not, this isn't the best because it was all done before high definition existed. But you can see my crew members there. Everybody has a different job to do. We're all helping each other. And so this is me, but if you notice, this is the space station as we're coming in, but I'm not even looking at it. I was looking at a monitor that had this target on it. And my job was to keep that target centered as we closed in. So it was like a real-life video game. Yeah. And once we got there, we had about, maybe 5 seconds to celebrate and high-five each other. And then it was back to work to keep doing things. So we're operating the hardware that's going to pull the pieces together. And so we've now created a tunnel that goes from our side to the space station side. So we could put air inside that tunnel, and then we could open the hatch on the space shuttle side. And that target that we were looking at is right there. And now we can float up to the hatch at the space station. So when we got to the space station, there wasn't anybody home. In fact, we were the last ones to visit it before the permanent crew went up there. So it's been, since a week after I landed, there have been people on the space stations. And that's been since 2000. So we're coming up on 18 years of having constant people up there. And my crewmate opened the hatch there, and he started to float in, and then he backed out. And he said, "No, Brian, why don't you go in first?" I thought, wow, what a nice guy. Let my commander go in. It was only later I learned he was using me as the canary in the coal mine to go in and check the atmosphere inside. So the first permanent crew was launching the following week. And they were going to be breathing the air inside the space station for 6 months. So the doctors wanted to know what was in the air, what chemicals were in the air. And so the very first thing we did was take an air sample. Koichi Wakata, my Japanese astronaut who was on my crew, he was my robotic arm operator. And so this is a little cartoon of what Koichi had to do, lifting this big piece out. That doesn't look that big there, but it would fill up a good part of this gym here with its size, and it weighed about 20,000 pounds. And then while we were training, they said, well, we know you're going to be really busy, but would you mind making a movie? So they actually taught us how to be movie producers, and this scene I was shooting with an IMAX camera. It's in a movie called Space Station 3D, and here's Pam's changing out the film. Now the neatest thing that the spacewalkers got to do was to test fly a self-rescue jetpack. So in the old days, if somebody was doing a spacewalk and they became disconnected from the space shuttle and they started floating away, then I could always just fly the space shuttle over and rescue them if I liked them. So they wanted to be able to rescue themselves. So here you can see one of the astronauts coming right at the camera that was filming this, and you can see how stable he is. So he's very much under control. In a few seconds here, he'll put some inputs in so that he doesn't hit the camera. But again, you can see how his trajectory changes and how responsive it is. So if he ever were to fall off the space station, he would have no trouble recovering himself, saving himself. We had one day to push supplies across. You can see cables there. When you don't have gravity to make a cable fall to the floor, they have a mind of their own there. So we had this extra day that we were going to be docked to the space station, and we used that to push across bags of supplies. So all of these white bags that you see Velcroed everywhere, those are bags of food and water and clothing and tools and experiments, things that the crew is going to need permanently. So this is in the U.S. segment that was on the station at the time. So to undock, we just kind of do the reverse of what we did going in. So we close the hatch, and then we separate from the vehicle, and we fly away from the space station. Now, during our training, it became very obvious to me that Pam Melroy was going to be a future space shuttle commander. In fact, she became the second woman commander in the space shuttle program. Had a fabulous flying career. But the next time she would be going to the space station, she would be doing the flying as the commander. So to give her the practice and confidence, here she is here in the red shirt. I had her fly the undocking and the back away. Here we are separating we're over the east coast of South America there, of Brazil. You can see how bright the sunlight is up there because there's no air for the sunlight to go through, so it does not get diffused, doesn't get spread out. And then here we are, these are the pieces that we had added, this big piece and then that top piece. So and the 2 extra days that we had, there, we used them to do things to get ready to come back to Earth, come back to gravity. So we've been weightless for a couple of weeks. So here you see Pam exercising on a bicycle that we had. I chose to exercise a little differently. Here's Koichi getting a drink of water. And we had a baseball with us that we were going to present to the Japanese Little League after landing. But we didn't have a bat, so we had to use a hammer for a bat. And now we decided that hitting a baseball was just too easy, so we had Jeff try to hit a peanut M&M. Well, at least he didn't miss it, right? Well, on the third extra day, we knew we were coming home, so we set up a assembly line downstairs to help each other get in our pressure suits. And then up here on the flight deck, I'm on the left, Pam's on the right, and Bill is here in the foreground with the checklist. And we did the deorbit burn coming into California instead of into Florida. And rolled out on final. We're just a big glider at this point, so I'm aiming in a 20-degree dive. I'm aiming at a black rectangle that's oiled in the lake bed right there. And at 2,000 feet, right there, I start the nose up, and now you can see the runway we're going to land on coming into view. And Pam and I are working as a team here, so she puts the landing gear down at 400 feet right there, and then she starts calling out, I'm doing the flying, so she's calling out altitudes and airspeeds, and there's a certain cadence that I want to hear. I want to hear 50, 250, 40, 240, 30, 230, 20, 220, 10, 210, touch, right at 200 knots. And then Pam put the drag chute out, which you'll see here, and that was really effective at helping us slow down. And I flew the nose wheel down to the runway. And then after a couple of hours, we were out of the vehicle and headed powered down, and that's the Space Shuttle Discovery there in the background. So we were happy to be home. So the space shuttle program was it was a program we flew it 135 times. It lasted 30 years. We got to do a lot of really neat things with it. We got to deploy and then continually upgrade the Hubble Space Telescope. We got to build the International Space Station. That took 37 missions just to do that, which is a lot. And I think that's really important because when I look at the space, when I look back at my life and my career, I say I was a product of what I would call the moon generation because I watched the moon happen while I was growing up. You are the Mars generation. You are going to see somebody walk on Mars in your lifetime, which is really cool. And it could be one of you. You never really know. So what we've done to make that happen is we've taken a lot of what we learned in those years flying the space shuttle, and we put them into the new vehicle. It's called the Space Launch System, or the SLS as we talk about it. And you can see it's very similar in looks to the space shuttle. It too has booster rockets. It has a big tank there, but instead of hanging the crew off the side of the vehicle, the crew sits up on the top there in something called the Orion spacecraft. So the Orion is going to have to do even more than the space shuttle did. The space shuttle, we went to Earth orbit around there. We got as much as 17,500 miles an hour. The Space Launch System and the Orion are going to go beyond the moon and ultimately to Mars. And so they're going to see speeds of 27,000 miles an hour when they're coming back. So while the air outside the space shuttle was 3,000 degrees hot, outside Orion, when it's coming back from the moon, it's going to be 4,000 degrees out there. So, and the Orion is made up of a number of pieces. The crew rides in the capsule. It has what they call a launch abort system, which is just a safety system that allows the crew to be able to get out of a bad situation if they need to. And then it has the piece of it that has all the supplies that the crew needs. The Space Launch System itself, the big rocket, and it's really big too. It's 320 feet tall or so. So it has the booster rockets similar to the space shuttle, only it has an extra segment in there, so it's a little bit bigger. And the engines on the back of the core section there, those are actually engines that we flew on the space shuttle programs. So we've taken a lot of what we learned from the last 30 years, and we've moved it into the programs that you can come work on if you want. If you want to be part of the space program. Anybody want to be part of the space program? Yeah. Any astronauts? So if you do get to do it, someday you might be able to have a view like this as you're coming back from Mars. There, you'll be able to see the Earth and the Moon. There, and if you do me a favor and bring me a good high-def picture so I can use it in my presentation. So I think with that, we probably have a few minutes for some questions. If we can do that, you could. If that's all right. Have somebody relay it.
All right. Are there going to be astronauts going to study other galaxies someday?
Well, yeah, are there going to be astronauts going to study other galaxies someday? That's way out in the future, I think. I think in the near future, it's at least in the next 40 years or 50 years, probably colonizing the moon, going back to the moon and staying there at this time, and also going to Mars will be things. So those will be the things that will be happening in the near future. Yeah, how many years does it take to be an astronaut? I have to admit, I started training to be an astronaut, even though I didn't know it when I was your age, because it starts when you're in school. because the things that you use and you learn in school, you use in your astronaut career and other careers. But I started, you know, when we showed that launch picture of the space shuttle launching, there was a lot going on there. There was a lot of engineering, there was a lot of computer science, there was communication skills. So you're starting right now.
Who's your favorite astronaut?
Who's my favorite astronaut? You checking me to see if I'm a narcissist? My favorite astronaut, you know, I have a number of them. John Glenn was certainly one of my heroes. He was the first American to orbit the Earth. John Young and Bob Crippen, when they flew the very first space shuttle mission, you know, the vehicle had never been flown before, and for the very first time, we flew a first flight with a crew on board. That had never happened. So those guys, they were my hero test pilots, doing what they did.
You guys are in space. Why can't you see the stars?
He asked why you cannot see stars when you're in space.
It's pretty bright there when you're up there. In the nighttime, when you're on the dark side, you can see more stars up there than you do down here. It makes you feel really small. You realize how big the universe is.
Were you one of the first 8 people to go to the moon?
I wish. No, I always dreamed of going to the moon, but it never happened in my career. I was the 236th human to go into space of all time. Somebody actually keeps track of that. Oh, was this the alien question? Yeah. Let's see. How many of you think I might have seen an alien? No, I hate to say it, but I haven't seen any other little people or little green men or anything like that. So you have seen some really neat things, though. Oh, you know that those planets, we don't have the transportation system yet to be able to get people beyond the moon and Mars. Those are the best we've been able to do. So some of the distant planets, they're not on our radar yet. We're not going to be able to get there. Sure. How many hours was I in space? Yeah, somebody keeps track of that too. It was like, I want to say 940 hours or something. It was just a little under 1,000. Has what happened? I guess I don't know. Yeah, one more. How what? How old am I now? 64. I'm a happy grandfather. Okay, all right. Well, I hope that the little bit of time that we've had here, you've learned a few things, and I do want to tell you that if you want to be part of the space program, you can do that because there are people in Oklahoma here. One of the reasons that I'm here now is because there are companies here in Oklahoma that are making parts for the Space Launch System and for the Orion, and so Oklahoma is part of the way to deep space. So you are, because you live in Oklahoma, you can be part of the space program if you want. Maybe an astronaut, maybe an engineer, maybe something else. But if you want to do it, do well in school. And I always like to advise to find something that you like and then work to become the best at it, work your hardest at it. Because when NASA wants to hire people, they're looking for people that are the best at what they do. And so you want to work to be the best at whatever it is you do. And there are many, many, many different things that you can work at. So, and with that, I guess I'll wrap it up and say I wish everybody the best. And don't forget, when you're coming back from Mars, get me that high-def picture.
Let's thank Mr. Duffy. Say thank you. You guys asked such great questions.
Where do you want me?
Just look at us, kind of in between the cameras.
Okay.
And if you could say and spell your first and last name.
Sure. I'm Brian Duffy, Brianduffy.
All right. I'll start off asking just a real simple question. What brings you here today? What are you doing here today?
Well, I'm part of Orbital ATK, which is a company that's working on the Space Launch System. And we have a group that's here visiting Oklahoma because, we like to say that the road to deep space exploration goes through Oklahoma because we have a lot of suppliers that are here. So we're here celebrating with the suppliers, their successes, and also visiting with the schools and talking with the students and telling them what's going on and what's in their future because, the future of space exploration is in elementary school right now.
What are you looking for these elementary school students? I mean, what is your vested interest?
Well, we'd like to get them interested in science and math, and we'd like to let them know that the opportunity is there for them if they want to be part of the space program, and then we can share with them a little bit about what they could do to make that happen.
What is it like for you sharing your experience with these young kids?
Yeah, I love talking with the children because they really are the future of the space program. And, I can only put myself back in that spot and think of what would I have thought if I had an astronaut come to my school when I was in the 3rd grade there. And so bringing the message of, that space exploration is fun and it's interesting and maybe hopefully getting them excited is what we're trying to do.
Can you talk about how long you were in the space program and what programs you were a part of?
Sure, yeah. So I was selected in 1985 to be a space shuttle pilot, and prior to that I was an Air Force pilot, Air Force fighter pilot, and Air Force test pilot. And so I was in the office, the astronaut office, for 16 years, during which time I flew 4 times, all in the space shuttle. So.
And what's something that you've learned when you've been speaking to children? What's something that you've learned from that?
Yeah, the interest in space exploration is universal. And, it starts with a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, and it goes to 85 and 90-year-olds. People and everywhere in between are interested in space exploration. And so I enjoy bringing the message to them, sharing my experiences with them, and, hopefully if the youngsters get them excited, because this could be their future if they want it to be.